Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Let's Talk Fantasy Football. I am your host for today. My name is Nick Walsh, and I am here by myself today. I'll get into why that is and why you are getting the Week 11 preview here so late in just a moment. But first, I'd like to give a quick shout out to Bench Boss. Bench Boss is the revolutionary app that allows you to play fantasy football live while watching the game on TV. Predict the plays, the results of the play, and literally play fantasy football. You can sign up for the beta now by going to letstalkfantasyfootball.com/benchboss. So as I mentioned, guys, I am here by myself. We try and get this preview out to you guys. We try and get it recorded either Wednesday or Thursday night pretty much every week. Get it out to you guys somewhere between Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. That was supposed to be the case this week, and it's my fault, but, sometimes real life issues and whatever else do come into play. This was one of those weeks. So again, I apologize. It was completely my fault. It should have been myself and Don getting you the good old 2-part preview. Instead, what you're getting here is Saturday morning with Walsh drinking his coffee and watching the Michigan-Wisconsin game on mute in the background here. So we'll have this out to you guys, Saturday afternoon. It should be, and hopefully some of you are able to get some good information from that, make some decisions. I would assume, at least some of you will be able to listen to this because we're getting lineup questions up until basically lineups lock on Sunday morning. So, never hurts. So without further ado, guys, I'm going to get right through the games. This is just going to be a 1-part podcast. It'll be me just going through, breaking down my thoughts on each of these matchups, and then we'll get you on out of here, hopefully better prepared to win your Week 11 matchups. So first of all, guys, the bye weeks this week, they're really not that bad, all things considered, in terms of, players that are going to be really fantasy relevant going into each week. So Carolina, the Jets, Indianapolis, and San Francisco are the 4 teams on the bye. I'm personally affected by Devin Funchess being out in a couple of leagues, but other than that, really not too much that's really going to affect your lineups too much. So not too bad. Let's get right into the games. We got Detroit at Chicago. Detroit is a 3-point favorite in this one. The over-under is 41. This is a matchup of 2 very solid defenses. Detroit is 11th in DVOA, and Chicago is 13th. Again, that's Football Outsiders DVOA, their defensive efficiency metric. Detroit is better against the pass than the run. So in terms of the Chicago offense, I would say Jordan Howard is probably an okay play. I think you're starting him anyway, but if you've been starting him, you know what his floor is. It's not very high because he doesn't really get that passing down work. He doesn't really get targeted that much. But if Jordan Howard gets in the end zone against Detroit, he's a worthwhile play. I think there's a pretty good chance of that. In terms of the rest of that Chicago offense, Dontrell Inman did get 8 targets this past week. This was a week where Mitchell Trubisky threw the ball more than he had in his entire NFL career. So keep that in mind. But they traded for Dontrell Inman for a reason, it seems like. And in his first game being active for the Bears, they did give him those 8 targets. He did get 6 catches. So I think he's a guy who should be owned in pretty much every league. And if you need a desperation start, that kind of thing, I don't think Inman's the worst play that you could make. On the Detroit side of the ball, I don't know what to make of Amir Abdullah. I own him in my big league. I have trouble deciding whether or not to start him every week. Whether or not he produces seems to be independent of really the matchup. It's really kind of like flipping a coin. So I don't really know what to tell you on that. Other than that, I think Golden Tate doesn't really have a great matchup in the slot there against Chicago, but he's getting the kind of targets where you need to be playing him every week. And I would still expect him to produce at least an okay level. Marvin Jones disappointed a lot of us this past week. He has a theoretically good matchup. We'll likely see a lot of Kyle Fuller, who is susceptible to big plays, and we know that Marvin Jones does have that speed. He can get those big plays. So I think Marvin Jones, despite being very disappointing this past week, is likely a pretty solid play. In this game, I'm going to take Detroit. So let's move on to Kansas City at the New York Giants. Despite being on the road, Kansas City is a 10-point favorite. The over-under here is 46, and that's not really surprising. The Giants just got beat by the 49ers for the Niners' first win of the season this past week, and they're an extremely bad team. We also have the Andy Reid off a bye week narrative, and we make fun of narratives or whatever else, but Andy Reid teams off a bye week have historically been very good. So I wouldn't be surprised at all to see the Chiefs just rout the Giants here. It's a 10-point line, and I think I'm still going to bet the Chiefs if I bet this game at all. I definitely won't be betting the Giants. So, like pretty much every week, Alex Smith, Travis Kelce, and Tyreek Hill are all solid plays. Travis Kelce, theoretically, I think is the best tight end play, or at least the best just total projected tight end play on the board this week. The Giants do have that streak of touchdowns given up to tight ends. It did not end this past week. Garrett Selleck did work out as a streamer. So if you played him, kudos to you. And then Kareem Hunt also, I think, could be the best running back play of the week. I know he's been trending downwards for a number of weeks now, but Damon Harrison, who is the Giants' best run defender, he is one of their defensive tackles. He is currently questionable. If he doesn't play, the Giants' run defense, which hasn't been stellar anyway this year, is losing their best defender. And then you end up with just Kareem Hunt as a 10-point favorite against a leaky run defense. So I like all of those things, and coming off a bye. So, if you had any nagging injuries, whatever it is, Kareem Hunt, I think, is a great play this week, particularly if we see Damon Harrison not suit up on Sunday. That being said, the Giants should also produce some fantasy points here. They will have to throw the ball. They will have to speed up the offense, run a lot of plays in order to try and catch up against this Kansas City team. Likely, again, it's possible they go up early or whatever, but I think the likeliest scenario is that Kansas City does go up and the Giants are playing behind for basically the whole second half. So Evan Ingram and Sterling Shepard, I think, are great plays. They're basically the two guys who are absorbing most of the passing targets in this offense. Ingram has been one of the best fantasy tight ends in the league this year. I don't expect that to change at all. The Chiefs defense hasn't been spectacular either. And then I think Orleans Darkwa, he's, limited in his upside, but if he gets in the end zone, he works out really well. If he doesn't get in the end zone, he's generally been able to get you to around 10 PPR points, even when he doesn't get in the end zone, which, as an RB2, a flex or whatever, you'll likely take that most weeks. And then I think Eli Manning is a guy who should produce this game. I mean, he might throw some picks. He might make some mistakes, but he should, be able to get you those 15 fantasy points that you're looking for from a streamer. I'm going to take Kansas City in this game, and we're moving on to Tampa Bay at Miami after I take a quick sip of my coffee. All right, so the Tampa Bay at Miami game is currently a pick'em. It started, I believe, as with Tampa Bay as a favorite. It is moved to a pick'em. The over-under is 41.5. And I think the biggest story in terms of Tampa Bay this week is that this should really be the Mike Evans comeback game. He's been disappointing for a couple weeks straight, and then he had that suspension. Miami's been just terrible against the pass, terrible against wide receivers, terrible against number one wide receivers. Even with Ryan Fitzpatrick throwing him the ball, I would expect Mike Evans to really put up a great game this week. So don't be afraid of throwing him back in your lineup after that suspension. With the rest of the offense, Doug Martin has been disappointing since that first week back. I'd say him and Deshaun Jackson are low-end starters. I would say Cam Brate is also a borderline starter. The Dolphins have been pretty bad against the tight end, but he hasn't been as involved in the offense over the past few weeks as he was earlier. Lower snap share, lower targets. So I'm skeptical of the rest of the offense. I think Mike Evans is the lock-in play of the week on this offense, and the rest are kind of guys where if you need to, you can. If you have any specific questions about these guys, please feel free to send them in to us. We'll try and get them answered as quickly as possible. On the Dolphins side of the ball, We have the big stories, I guess, are Kenyon Drake and Damian Williams. This past week, Drake got a 66-yard TD, but Williams actually outsnapped him. The week before, it was Williams who broke the long run, or I believe had a long pass actually, and Drake outsnapped him. But the bottom line is these guys basically have the same exact role in this offense. They're just splitting the time. So the two have the same amount of touches in their first two games on the same amount of carries, and Williams has just one more target, same amount of catches. So it's basically the same exact role for either of them. I think either of them are low end RB2, high end RB3 type guys, flex type plays. So it's one of those where, depending on your team talent, you might have to play one of them, and I don't think it's a bad play by any means. I think I'd rather play either of them than Doug Martin. I don't know if that's stupid to say, but maybe that's not true. I think all three of them are probably around the same sort of projection from me for this week. And then in the passing game, I think you can work Cutler as a streamer. I think Parker and Landry continue to be solid plays here. The Bucs defense has not been very good against the pass, so we'll see really what happens in this game. But I don't expect the Dolphins to have any issue, at least getting enough passing work done to make Parker and Landry relevant this week. All right, I'm going to take Miami in this one. I think it's a tough one, but yeah, I think I'll take Miami. And let's move on to Baltimore at Green Bay. Despite being on the road here, Baltimore's a 2-point favorite. The over-under here, though, is only 38. So not many points expected. It's going to be cold as shit in Lambeau. I guess expect the ball to be run a lot, but I don't know if that's really going to work as much, and I don't know what we can do with that, because the situation with Baltimore is that we have Danny Woodhead coming back from his injury. So while we've had a Buck Allen, Alex Collins split for most of the year, now we're throwing Danny Woodhead into that mix. What does that do? Whose work gets siphoned? My best guess would be that Alex Collins' role might stay around the same, and Buck Allen would have some work taken from him. I don't know whether they're going to throw Woodhead into, what they plan on being his role for the rest of the year in his first week back. I don't want to play any of them in this matchup. I don't think it's a great matchup. If I was going to play any of them, I would probably be playing Collins, because he's just the most straight line runner, who you would think in a cold weather game would be the ground and pound type guy. I think the one play on Baltimore, though, this week is Jeremy Maclin. Those cornerbacks for Green Bay have not been good. Maclin has been getting targets, and he's been producing since coming back from his injury. And I'm a big fan of Maclin to continue to do that this week. I haven't really made my DFS lineups, but just based on what I think Maclin's price will be, I think I'm going to end up with him in a lot of them. I have been playing him over the past few weeks as well, and it's been working out for me. So, I think you can plug him in no problem. On the Green Bay side of the ball, the big story is that Aaron Jones and Ty Montgomery are both out. Jamal Williams is going to be the starting running back. He has not really shown anything impressive this year, so keep that in mind. And it's also not a great matchup against this Ravens run defense. So you've got a running back who's not that impressive against a Ravens defense that's pretty good. And with a rookie quarterback in there, I would be expecting the Ravens to say to Brett Hundley, beat us through the air. So despite the fact that Jamal Williams seems to have an easy track to volume, I don't think he's a great matchup there. I don't think he's really a great play this week. Maybe he gets in the end zone, but I don't see this being, a 22 carry, 104-yard game really for him, as much as maybe I see it being an 18 carry, 54-yard game, that kind of thing. So the touchdown's really going to make the difference in that sort of case. In terms of the pass catchers, Davante Adams has really been the guy that Hundley has targeted the most consistently since he started playing. I'd say Davante Adams is the number one play here. And I don't know that you need to play anyone else. I don't know that you need to play Jordy Nelson, which is unfortunate, but I think that's the truth at this point. The targets just haven't been there relative to Adams, and targets from Hundley are not the same thing as targets from Aaron Rodgers. So Nelson is really a touchdown-dependent wide receiver at this point in the season, and I don't think that's a guy that you need to be playing necessarily. I would rather be playing Maclin in this matchup than I think I would be playing Jordy Nelson. I'm going to take Green Bay with the upset on this one. I think it's going to be a very low-scoring game. That's probably me being a little bit biased. I like Green Bay. I enjoy watching them, and I have some good friends such as Rogers and Don who are big Green Bay fans. I'm just going to take them in this one because I want to. The next game here on our list is the Rams at the Minnesota Vikings. This, in terms of real-life purposes, is the game of the week to me. I think it's the most interesting game. These teams are both 7-2, and this should be a very, very fun game. Minnesota is a 2.5-point favorite. The over-under is 46. This was the most interesting real-life game of the week, but I really don't think it's an incredible game for fantasy purposes. The Rams are first in DVOA, and Minnesota is ninth. So these are two top third of the NFL defenses, with the Rams being the best, again, by this DVOA metric. That's not the end-all be-all, but I think it's a pretty good indicator. So I think all your normal starters should be played in this game, but you should maybe temper expectations. And by your normal starters, I think the four really are Gurley, McKinnon, Thielen, and Diggs. I know McKinnon's being outsnapped a little bit by Latavius Murray at this point in the season. I still think McKinnon's really the play just because he gets that passing down work, and in PPR, that's just such a big thing. Even in half-point PPR, I really think it's the better play here. Regarding Robert Woods, he's been the favorite target of Jared Goff over the past couple of weeks. He doesn't have a great matchup in this one, but he has been targeted downfield consistently enough that I think you can play him if you need to. I don't think he's a must play, but you can throw him in there and, hope that he gets one of those big plays, maybe a big play touchdown, as he's been wont to do these past couple of weeks. And then in terms of the best matchups for these Rams wide receivers, I think it's Cooper Kupp. He's going up against Terrence Newman in the slot. The only issue is that he hasn't really been breaking any big plays, and he's really shown himself to be TD dependent in terms of fantasy production. So what's the likelihood of him getting that TD this week? I'm not really sure. He hasn't been consistently targeted in the red zone over the past couple weeks. So while I think it's the best matchup and I think it's something that you can try and go after, I don't think it's a must play again. Out of the two of them, Robert Woods is still probably the higher ranked one for me. Now, that being said, I just talked about how those defenses are, good, but these are both teams that have shown that they've been willing and able to get into shootouts this year. So while I don't think it's the most likely outcome that they get into a shootout, I do think it's definitely within the range of possibilities. So if you're looking to maybe make a game stack in daily fantasy, I don't think this is the worst game to try that with. I haven't really come full circle on my thoughts on that yet. I'm debating whether or not I think it's a good one to game stack because the line isn't at that high and people won't necessarily be on it. But these are both teams where we've had a lot of fantasy production these past couple of weeks. And I think because of that, they might be a little bit over-owned relative to their actual expectation. So, yeah, just keep that in mind, I guess, if you are playing daily. If you're not, don't worry about it. All right, and then the last game here before we get a quick break. So Arizona at Houston. Houston is a 1.5-point favorite in this game. I believe it actually started with Arizona as a favorite, but that was back when we thought Drew Stanton was going to play, I believe. And then the over-under is 38. So again, a very low over-under here. I don't think there's much for fantasy purposes in this game. I think for Houston, it's Hopkins, even though his matchup is bad. He's DeAndre Hopkins. I don't think you're going to sit him because he's the kind of guy who can put together a passable fantasy day just because he gets like 16 targets, and he's going to have Patrick Peterson on him. That's obviously bad, but it's DeAndre Hopkins. You're not going to sit him. The other guy that I think you can take a shot on, and another guy that I'm considering going very heavy on in daily, is Bruce Ellington. He's been getting a decent amount of targets lately. With Will Fuller out, he's the next guy up, and Arizona's just gotten absolutely toasted by these complimentary receivers for most of the year. So with Peterson on DeAndre Hopkins, they're going to need production elsewhere. I think Bruce Ellington is the likeliest next or the likeliest option to do that. So yeah, I think you can put Bruce Ellington into a fantasy lineup this week with the relative amount of confidence. In the backfield, we saw Lamar Miller get out carried by Deontay Foreman this past week. I'm not really trusting either of them this week. I don't think it's worth it. I mean, if you've been starting Lamar Miller and you really need to, like, then you need to start him. But it's not a great play, and I'm not going out of my way to do it. On the Arizona side of the ball, there are two guys who I believe should be started this week. And again, this is with Blaine Gabbert starting. I think Larry Fitzgerald is still a very good start. Blaine Gabbert has shown hesitation to throw outside the numbers. He's really liked the slot receivers in his career. Last year with San Francisco, he threw a lot to Jeremy Curley in the slot. He kind of made him relevant. So I think Fitzgerald is a great play in the slot. I think Gabbert's going to pepper him with targets all day. And then Adrian Peterson should get 20 some odd touches against a below average run defense. So while I don't think Adrian Peterson is good at this point in his career, 20 touches is worth something, and it's probably worth a fantasy start. So keep that in mind. And with that being said, we are going to get a quick word from our friends over at Bench Boss. And we are back. Again, that was our good pals over at Bench Boss. Make sure you are checking them out. Let's talk fantasyfootball.com/benchboss. I just realized I haven't been picking the last couple of games. I'm just not going to do that from here. So whatever. It's my podcast. I'll do what I want, I guess. The next game that we have, well, let's see. First of all, looks like we got 7 games to get through. Some of these will be quicker than others. With the second half of this podcast, I'll try and get through it and get you guys out of here as quickly as possible. We got Jacksonville at Cleveland, another game with just a really low over-under, and in this one, also just a really, really high line. So Jacksonville's an 8-point favorite. The over-under is just 37.5. So that's a huge, huge distinction in implied point total. Cleveland really just not expected to do well at all this week by our friends over in Vegas. On the Jacksonville side of the ball, Cleveland's run D has been pretty good this year, but you're not going to sit Leonard Fournette as an 8-point favorite. You're just not going to do it. So lock him into your lineups. I don't think you need to lock him into any daily lineups or that kind of thing. But yeah, in season long, you're playing Leonard Fournette. In the pass game for Jacksonville, Allen Hurns is out. Marquise Lee seems like a lock for a bunch of targets. I think he should be started pretty much unanimously. It's worth noting that D.D. Westbrook is active off the injured reserve. He is an interesting player. He really killed it in preseason. The likelihood of him producing in these last couple of weeks, I don't know how high that is. I picked him up in one league just to stash. I don't know if I'm going to keep him around, but name worth keeping an eye on this week, not worth playing this week. On the Browns side of the ball, Crowell and Duke are probably both okay plays. We've seen Crowell really pick it up, getting a little bit involved in the passing game, and also get in the end zone these past couple of weeks. So I think both of them are okay plays with low ceilings, RB2 flex type plays. And then Corey Coleman is back. This is, the worst pretty much matchup that you could have for him. You would think Jalen Ramsey will be covering him for pretty much the whole game. That being said, Corey Coleman's a weird wide receiver. He's not the typical archetype. I said this a couple weeks ago, and I wouldn't be surprised if he breaks a big play or something. I don't think you should be starting him, but he's got to be owned in every single league. And Corey Coleman will have fantasy relevant weeks during the rest of this season for sure. So with that being said, let's move on to Washington at New Orleans. New Orleans is a 7.5-point favorite. The over-under here is 51, so pretty high-scoring game. New Orleans defense has been stellar this year, which is not something I expected at all. So on the Washington side of the ball, there's 2 guys that I'm trusting. It is Vernon Davis, as long as Jordan Reed is out, which I believe he will be. And then Chris Thompson. Chris Thompson, he's he's that change of pace back, but when Rob Kelly's out, it hasn't just been all of Rob Kelly's work goes to Samaje Perine. It's been Chris Thompson picking up some of that work too. I believe he gets on average twice as many carries. I believe it's 6 and 12 roughly. So keep that in mind. I think Chris Thompson is a great play this week. He's a talented guy who can break a big play at any time, and he's going to get more work than he normally does. So yeah, all about Chris Thompson this week. Perine has been bad in his time as a starter for the most part, and this is a bad matchup for him. So I'm not looking to try and take advantage of that. I'm not aware of the rest of his schedule at this point in time. So I think he should be owned, and you might want to use him in future weeks, depending on whether or not Washington is a favorite, depending on the run defense of other teams. But yeah, I don't think he's a start at all this week. On the New Orleans side of the ball, obviously Ingram and Kamara, they are elite plays. They are every week pretty much. We saw them go off this past week. I don't know that that'll happen again, but these are guys who need to be started every week in every matchup pretty much. And then I think Drew Brees is startable, as Washington has been pretty bad against the pass. And then Michael Thomas is the other guy I'm really looking at, as he's likely going to avoid Josh Norman. Josh Norman hasn't really shadowed this year. He stayed on his side, and Thomas plays the majority of his snaps in the slot. So he might see a little bit of Norman, but he won't be seeing him for the majority of the game. I'm a fan of that. I'm a fan of Michael Thomas this week. You could throw Ted Ginn in there as, that deep threat type guy. Hope he breaks a big play. I don't think that's the worst play in the world. I don't think it's the best play in the world either. So those are the guys I'm into this week in this game. And let's move on to Buffalo Chargers. So the Chargers are a 4-point favorite, and with an over-under of 43.5, I think I'm going to bet the Chargers in this game. And the reason being that Buffalo benched Tyrod Taylor to start Nate Peterman. If you listen to the podcast at all, you know that we in general, and particularly myself, are huge fans of Tyrod Taylor. We think he's very, very good. I think he's very, very good at quarterback. I am very upset that this is what Buffalo is doing in the middle of playoff run. They're 5-4. They're still in the playoff mix here. So it's, I think it's a terrible decision. I expect, you knew at some point they were going to move on from Tyrod, but you wouldn't think it would be during the middle of a playoff run. I don't get it. So anyway, Buffalo just got 298 rushing yards hung on them last week, and they're now starting rookie quarterback Nathan Peterman. Phillip is going to play for the Chargers, and for me, it's Melvin Gordon and it's Austin Eckler, and I think you can play both of them. I would expect Gordon to get the bulk of the carries, but I think both of these guys are pretty solid plays. You can throw both into your lineup and expect them to produce. In terms of the rest of the Chargers offense, Keenan Allen hasn't eclipsed 10 targets since week 5. He hasn't gotten more than 67 yards receiving since week 4, and he hasn't scored since week 1. So it's tough to, he's not killing you each week, but he's not doing what we expected. So it's tough to say. This isn't the best matchup for him either. And like I said, I think Gordon and Eckler are really the guys who are going to benefit the most in this game. I don't know if you're sitting Keenan Allen, though. I think maybe you consider it if he doesn't perform against this again this week. But I think unless you clearly have better options, he's not a guy that I'm looking to sit. On the Buffalo side of the ball, the only start for me is Shady, and even out there on tempering expectations. I don't know really that much about Nathan Peterman. I don't want to trust him, any of his pass catching options. I think Shady's upside goes down without Tyrod in there, but he's Shady. And hopefully what happens is Peterman peppers him with targets as this season goes on, and we can see him produce a little bit. Cincinnati at Denver. This game sucks for fantasy purposes. Denver is a 2.5-point favorite. The over-under here is 38.5. For me, it's AJ Green is the only lock in your lineup, and then I think Mixon, Emmanuel Sanders, and Demaryius Thomas are all borderline starts. I don't want anything to do with this Broncos backfield. It's looking more like the Giants backfields of these past couple of years where they have three guys each getting a third of the snaps. There's no clear advantage. There's no way to guess who's going to produce, who's going to score. I don't really have any idea how you would predict any of that. And it's a shame. So we can't play any of them. I don't think Mixon is a good start, but you might want to. It's worth noting that Gio should probably be owned at this point because Jeremy Hill is on IR. So Gio might see an uptick in workload. Yeah, that's pretty much all I got. Sanders and DT are the only guys I want to play on the Broncos. There's really just not much to go through with this game. So we'll move right on to New England at Oakland. I say it's at Oakland, but it's actually not. It's technically a Raiders home game on the schedule. It's in Mexico City, though. So New England is a 7-point favorite. The over-under is 54.5, and that over-under has increased as the week has gone on. These defenses are 32nd, that's Oakland's, and 30th in Football Outsiders DVOA. So this is a play everybody game. Chris Hogan is out for the Patriots. So in my mind, you're playing Tom Brady, Rob Gronkowski, Brandon Cooks, Danny Amendola, and all three of those running backs. So Burkhead, James White, and Dion Lewis. I think you're playing all of those players. That's 7 Patriots that I think you're starting pretty much no matter what. On the Oakland side of the ball, I think you're playing Derek Carr. I think you are playing Amari Cooper, Michael Crabtree, Jared Cook, and then we'll see. I think there's an argument to be made for playing Marshawn Lynch because one of the ways the Raiders might try and attack this game is by pounding Marshawn against this weak Patriots front in order to try and keep the ball out of Tom Brady's hands. I could also see that going very wrong because it's possible that the Raiders go down early in this game and Marshawn just kind of gets phased out of the game plan. So I think he's a very low floor option. I don't even really think he has the highest ceiling. He's a borderline start for me. The whole Raiders passing game is a start. I don't think you can start the other Raiders running backs. That's about all I got for this one. So let's move on to Sunday Night Football. That is Philadelphia at Dallas. Philly's a 4.5-point favorite on the road. The over-under here is 48. The guys on Philly that I think you're starting no matter what are Wentz, Ajayi, Ertz, and Jeffrey. They've all been producers, with the exception of Ajayi, but you would think that this week he would really come into his role as the starting running back, having had that bye. And I think Aguilar you can start if you really need to, but I don't think he's a necessary start. He's another one of these guys who's really been touchdown dependent. He doesn't really get the targets to sustain week-to-week performance without getting in the end zone. So, he's a guy to throw in and hope for a touchdown if you need to. On the Cowboys side of the ball, I prefer Rod Smith over Alfred Morris of the two running backs. Rod Smith had 9 targets this past week. He's clearly the passing down guy. And, with this Eagles team, it's very possible that the Eagles get up early and the Cowboys kind of have to pass the ball a lot. Tyron Smith is out again. That's their starting left tackle. He made a huge difference last week. Adrian Claiborne, their defensive end, had 6 sacks going up against the backup there. I believe it is a different backup lineman playing left tackle this week. I do not have that name, and I apologize for that. But it's still not a good situation. Hopefully the Cowboys have done some things to mitigate that situation this week because last week, it's clear looking at their protections and whatever else that they've just had Tyron Smith out on an island for the entire year because they haven't needed to do anything else. He's so good that they've just been able to put him out there with no help and have it not be an issue. So I don't think they realized that going into last week that would be an issue. Hopefully over the week this week, they've installed some protection packages where they either have running backs chipping on that side or potentially the tight end coming over and maybe helping out on that side. So I think you could see Witten stay in line and block a little bit more there. Because if not, they're going to get roasted on that side again. I think in this game you can start Dak because Philly likes to run up the score. So Dak's going to get plenty of opportunities to throw the ball. And then in the passing game, I'm comfortable with Dez. I'm sure other people will produce. I don't know who they are, whether it's Jason Witten, Cole Beasley, Terrence Williams, Bryce Butler. I got no idea. So Dez is the guy that I want in that pass game. And like I said, Rod Smith, I think, is the running back to start of the two. Last game of the week, Monday Night Football, Atlanta at Seattle. Seattle's a 3-point favorite. The over-under here is 45. I really don't have a good read on this game. I'll be completely honest. I think on the Seahawks side of the ball, Russ is fine. I think Baldwin's a great play. I'm not sure how the rest of this passing game really lines up. I'm not sure how it works. Yeah, I mean, I guess Jimmy Graham, but Atlanta's been a pretty decent matchup against the tight end, though they did give up some points this past week. Yeah, it's tough. I think if you're going to take a stab at the backfield, J.D. McKissic is the guy to play. He finally got some touches this past week, and Atlanta has allowed a lot of yards to pass-catching running backs. So McKissic would be that guy with C.J. Prosise now on IR. Yeah, I don't think I'd be taking a chance on anyone else in that backfield right now. On the Falcons side of the ball, it's Julio, it's Tevin Coleman, and it's Mo Sanu. With Devontae Freeman out. And I think that's probably it. You could make an argument for Austin Hooper as a tight end streamer or, a low end tight end. I think that's a fine argument. I don't know how comfortable I am with him, but those are the three guys that I like. I'm not going out of my way to start Matt Ryan against this Seattle defense though. So yeah, that's all I got for you guys this week. I appreciate if you are listening to this one, and apologize for it getting out to you guys so late. We will definitely try and be back on our regular schedule. Last week, again, sometimes things come up. We are all people with normal jobs as well as doing this. We do this because we love it. So sometimes things like that and things like real life can get in the way a little bit. So again, apologize for that. We'll be back with you next week with the recap coming at you, and then hopefully a 2-part preview later in the week. So guys, for Let's Talk Fantasy Football, I am Nick Walsh. Later podcast.